Good evening and happy Diwali. Thanks for coming out to celebrate Dr. V Doshi on this festival day. I met Dr. Doshi for the first time 25 years ago to the day at IIM Bangalore. This encounter with him and my experience of that amazing masterwork changed the course of my life. It is my great honor to welcome Dr. Doshi to Bangalore and here to the Bangalore International Center. This evening's program is in memory of our dear friend Vimal Jain. He would have been really thrilled to be here. I remember after shooting for our first film on Dr. Doshi, Vimal kept saying that he wanted to see the footage, all 24 hours of it. We made big plans for a marathon sitting, but it was not meant to be. Vimal fashioned himself on his idea of Dr. Doshi, quick on his feet and finding architectural expression not as some abstract ideal, but through careful observation and messy negotiation, a sort of truly collaborative process. His practice architecture paradigm, I think Manoj and Sandy are here today, his partners, continue to produce work showing at its heart this appreciation for the contingent. Vimal had proposed opening up an office with me, Vimal Jain and me, Bijoy, because we could then call it Bijoy Jain Architects. We miss him dearly. And are so happy to have this opportunity to spend time with Dr. Doshi in Vimal's memory. This evening we have a packed program, presentations by Champaka Rajgopal from Azim Premji University, who has led several large public projects on urban policy, planning and design in India and abroad. Soumitra Ghosh, the internationally recognized architect. Both Champaka and Soumitra were educated at CEPT, the institution started by Dr. Doshi. Navnath Kanade, who worked with Dr. Doshi in the 60s, and Sanjay Mohe, both celebrated architects and educators, and both part of the BASE group. BASE, for those of you who don't know, stood for Beer and Slide Evenings, if I'm right. It was set up by, of course, with Navnath and Sanjay Mohe. There was Sharad Padalkar, Nikhil and Claire Ahani, Shankar Kanade, Navnath's elder brother, Edgar De Mello, and Prem Chandavarkar. I think Edgar, Navnath and Moya are here with us today, and I'm really glad to see all of you here. They, the BASE group, introduced so many of us from my generation to Dr. Doshi, and to looking and thinking about architecture and making this a part of a larger consciousness of humanity, music, arts, politics, myth, etc., etc. I attended 2 workshops, amazing workshops, a number of lectures, of course there was a lot of beer as well, and some incredible parties. Nikhil had the most amazing collection of music. They organized, and in being with them, realized the distance I had to travel and still have to travel. Their work and ideas continue to inspire me. Welcome Kanade sir and Sanjay Mohe sir. This evening, we also have 3 clips from the films my brother Premjit Ramachandran has made on Dr. Doshi. And finally, we will have a conversation with Dr. Doshi, moderated by Premjit. I welcome Sri Vasudevan Akitham, Rekhaji and Professor Chaya, who have accompanied Dr. Doshi from Ahmedabad. Dr. Raghuram from IIM Bangalore, thank you, sir, for making it out on a festival day. And Sri Ravi Chanda, who's here, the director of the BIC. I welcome all of you to the BIC, to Bangalore, to this evening's celebration of Dr. Doshi's great work and life. So thank you, and sit back and enjoy the show. Thanks. I invite...
Welcome, Doshi. It's indeed a pleasure to see you here. And so this morning, while I'm looking for one of the slides, I chanced upon the book, which was signed in 1989 by Doshi when I was doing my internship there. So one of his students, Shubhrajit, who had actually forced me and spoken to Doshi that he wants me to shift to Ahmedabad and do my internship and change the school. And Doshi, of course, was very encouraging, and And I went for the interview. Chaya, of course, was trying to dissuade me because I was losing 1.5 years. But I threw that away and I took it. So, in terms of learning, Doshi has been a wonderful mentor. And in my final year, when I was presenting the project which was near the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia, I had this huge clay model, and it was wonderful. I think that was one of the precious things of Doshi and all the teachers and mentors in Ahmedabad, that it was extremely constructive, it was encouraging, and I could see there was almost like a jugalbandi which happened between Doshi, Anant Raje, and Jamini Mehta. Three of them were there for the jury. So the learning is never enough. So I'm going to run through, as I try to also understand Doshi as a person, and also his work, because somehow I think there is a deeper link. And this is what I have tried to put together through a few slides. We can start, please. So this is a very personal narrative, actually, because it is what I sort of see and understand of Doshi's work, which begins with a very monastic sense. It has a quietude of another kind. It's also post-Corbusier, and it's a time which he's trying to find his ground into Ahmedabad. But all the time, there are elements which are appearing which break that monastic silence. I won't get into the details. I would like you to read perhaps the top right picture. There are elements which, and I'm not talking about architectural elements. I think my interest has been to understand a mind and work and the person. That's from school. Doshi's capacity to be comfortable with what he does not know, almost taking huge interest in jumping into something which is beyond his known capacity, and this was in the late 80s, early 90s, and I have seen him also struggling with this while this was being conceptualized, being worked out, and yet he would never give up. And that comfort, I think, with the unknown is very critical. Not knowing what a space will become, or perhaps he knew. Just like talking to Doshi, which is always open-ended. A lot of his architecture almost reflects that. It doesn't have contained boundaries. It leaves enormous number of possibilities. And I think that's something quite amazing which he explores in a number of projects. Because all these projects are in contained perimeters, but it would have its own open ends. I really don't know, a lot of the pictures are from Vastushil Foundation collection. This picture is, I don't know who the photographer is, but it's a wonderful picture, almost like a theater set, where I can have almost a completely different narrative with the people inside this space. Doshi talks a lot about Indian architecture and places, and I think there is something beyond that, which is the places of ambiguity, and which Doshi achieves immensely well with extremely modern and simple ways. how to be one and simultaneously be, or at another time, be possible to be appropriated for something else. Having one's voice, an own voice and identity, did come to Doshi after his return from Corbusier's office. And it's in the 80s, while conversations were going on, not only in India but also in the West, about Indianness and various things. And just like I'm sure Doshi must be thinking, even at that time, is this the right thing to do? We were also sort of critical at that time. Is it playing to the gallery or is it actually honest? So this was, I think it was a time of struggle, of finding a voice. The difference between ground and earth. And this is something which Doshi has surpassed immensely. The difference between ground and earth. Earth relates to us, has a different sense of value. So from the earth to all these different things, there is also about an inner stillness which the architecture shows. And this is a very difficult, it cannot be called a trick. You cannot curate it easily. And this perhaps comes only automatically as you do it, practice more and more. The last thing, which is about humanism and legacy. And here I have put Corbusier's sketch and Doshi's sketch and what it has done to number of people in the Indore project. And it makes a huge difference. And I think this is where, for letting people to have their sense of need and freedom to occupy the places that they live in. And that, I think, goes for Doshi because he's always left it open for people to become what they have the potential to be. And Doshi's largest contribution, which has been about making people. And that, I think, today, over lunch, we had 4 generations of teachers together. We had Doshi, we had Chaya, there was me, and I had a student of mine. So there were 4 generations together. So I'll end with one last line. So Doshi has asked very simple questions. Questions like, why is water wet? Or why is the air transparent? And he would ask it with a very childlike innocence. And his greatest strength has been that he has understood how to be with everything, everyone, but most importantly, but with himself. Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Mohi sir and then Kannadi sir to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it has been a pleasure, sir, to be in front of you and talk about few memories. One of the first memories is about visiting IIM for the first time, and that was about 35 years back. Mr. Nair had done the first phase. He's a contractor from Jina. And we were in CNT, and we booked a bus to visit IM. And it was like going through all these, almost a forest line. It was like visiting another city. And seeing it first time is slightly different than what you see IM now, because you see pictures, you know what is there, and then you visit there and try to, correct your perception. We had absolutely no idea what IM looked like. It just knew that it is Mr. Doshi's building. And we go there and we see this blank wall, huge blank wall, and one entrance, one small opening. And you go through that, and there is a slight semi-darkness, and you see this on the right side, that light coming in. And I so clearly remember there's one of these chaps called Pandurang. He just went there and stood under that light like that, for almost like a minute. And all of us just realized the power of that space. What it can do to somebody who is seeing it for the first time. So it was not a light, but it was that shade and silence as well. Because through that blank wall, you come in and see that, witness that shade. And we realized we used to use those SLR cameras those days, and they were not as efficient as our regular ones. So if there is light little less, you had to use a stand. And we suddenly realized that to take a photograph, you had to use a stand, and you could see everything clearly, because that light or shade was so well controlled that you could see everything. You see minute details. And on the left side, you see that staircase with a light coming through the mid-landing and creating that cone. And you said, wow, what a control over it, And that's where you start connecting it with emotions, with something great. We realized that we were in the presence of something great, something very, very overpowering. And just one material, just one gray stone, one gray concrete, kota stone flooring. And it's like, creating Indian music out of just one tanpura and one, harmonium and one tabla and just voice. And you create such a huge, amazing music out of it. And this was exactly like that, just few elements and you create absolute greatness out of it. And you always feel that some of these great creators, when they create something, it's an extension of their own persona. And I feel IM is almost like that. It's an extension of Mr. Doshi's persona. Because it has that greatness, but it has that humility, it has that, kind of warmth. It has that energy, and at the same time, it has that meditative quality, the pause, what you're talking about. And this building knows how to create a pause, and which is something so important in our present hectic life. And it has that simplicity, and every time you go there, you sort of learn everything new. Every time you discover something new. And on top of that, I think this is the one building which has aged most gracefully. And every time you go there, it looks better and better. Isn't it exactly like him? So then on, we started visiting that building at so many times, and as a base group, we visited it even in the middle of the night. Every time we used to go for a party, and after having a lot of drinks, and you come out of the hotel and you see a nice moonlight, and Nikhil and Edgar and Navnath will say, okay, let's go to IM. And we would drive in Navnath's car, one white Fiat, and we would go all the way there. And those days there was no issue. They would just to allow us to, And we were there one night, and there was, that time that building was not complete. It was only up to that pergola, that library pergola, and that first pergola was done. And that time there was there was a rehearsal of a drama was going on. And we thought, I mean, what a space, it's just perfectly fitting in to create that ambience, and students sitting at different levels in different staircases, it was absolutely mind-boggling. So IIM had always been like an encyclopedia of spaces for me, at least. Whenever I had a doubt, I would go there and discover the spaces, the columns turning into walls, and suddenly they become columns again. And there is amazing power to learn so many of things, and it just went on happening, connecting with emotions, But one more thing I always liked is during these all phases, it never looked incomplete. I mean, that's the skill of a designer, that you would stop it at whichever point, it still looked complete. And then you would say, oh, it's looking complete, but still something next would come, and still it would look complete. So that was something amazing about it. Now, I'd been lucky to be at the right place at the right time and meeting all these base groups. So that's where we learned most of the things. And the wonderful thing was IIM was happening, and Mr. Doshi would come there almost every month. And somebody would call. Most of the time it used to be Nikhil, and he would say, thanks. Thanks. And he would say, God is coming. And we'd say, oh. and then we would meet the next day, and it would be such a charged atmosphere that we would live in that phase, for so many days. And I always feel that when you see all those saints and all, you have these one hello around them, and that symbolizes that energy, I think. So I think he's exactly like that. He carries so much of energy, but he has this ability to pass on that energy to the others. So he doesn't keep it with him. He spreads it so much that you live in that phase for the next few days. So next day morning, after meeting him, I would really get up early in the morning, go to the office, sit and start working, thinking that I'll do something earth-shaking, So and then I would come back, and Canadians used to be our neighbors, so we would come back and continue that discussion again after dinner, and it was like being in a, kind of a different world. So it's about, showing us how to see around, and that's what that movie shows, that he just taught us how to look around, how to see things, something more than what you see, the inner beauty. Actually, it was not only Doshi. That time, even Korea used to be here. And imagine having two of them. So sometimes we would meet Mr. Korea also, because he was doing his office in Koramangala. And we used to, I remember not a single base meeting ending without mentioning Doshi and Korea. And it would end up into heated arguments, who is better, who is what, who is doing what. And it would really go into such an extent that it would become very, very fierce. You would almost fight with each other. But that shows how important these two people were to us. These two guys really made a difference to our life. They taught us everything, and it's an amazing process. So a chance to do something next to their work was very scary thing, and I had to go through this trauma. I had to do first. I did Kolam, then when I was in CNT, then extension of JNC, and then of course IIM. Now, when we were doing JNC and doing something, I was just hoping that Korea won't come and see the building. So, and I knew that if he would come and he'll say, "Oh, what the hell you have done?" But finally he came and saw it. But thankfully by then he was sobered down, and the same day evening we met in Edgar's house, and he was okay. So. But working on IIM was very difficult, because first of all, it's an extremely structured building. It's not just this, because when you just look up at the ceiling, every beam, every column, it has such a perfect geometry, and yet it creates that warmth. Yet it creates that connection. So that's something amazing. And how do you deal with that? And I was very, very scared even to start the work. And I remember we met Mr. Doshi, and we had gone to one of the dhabas. And that time he just, I don't know whether he remembers it, but he says, don't worry, just do what you feel like. If you want to put one shimmering glass, you put it, let it. I knew he was joking, but that gave a lot of confidence. That makes all the difference, that you felt, okay, there is somebody who is, even if you make a mistake, he would understand that it could be a mistake, because it would always be a mistake. You will never be able to reach up to the master. So, once I had asked him a question, why IIM is so gray and why it is not painted. So he said, if you paint something, people will know that it can be painted. And that's why it is so serene and so beautiful even now. Just few incidences before I just end up. After some of these base meetings, we used to in Navnath's car, we used to drop him to, he used to stay in, which was that hotel? Huh? Woodlands. He used to stay in Woodlands Hotel. And on the way, we stopped at that UB building, which was the older one, which had this exposed concrete, and now it is demolished. And we stopped there, and we told Mr. Doshi that, see, this is a nice building. So it was late in the night, some 11 o'clock, hardly any traffic. He said, no, I want to see how the landscape meets the building. So he got out of the car, he climbed onto the compound wall, and he wanted to look over the thing to see how landscape meets the building. He would have seen thousands of buildings with a landscape meeting, but he wanted to see one more. And that is something about learning, the urge to learn, and that's why that childlike quality, and that's the reason why he remains young all the time. Once he had come to give a slideshow, and we were all waiting to see his work, but instead of showing his work, he showed Alvar Aalto's work. And with such passion that every door handle and how the ceiling meets this, and with so much passion that you said, my God, we were waiting to see his work, and he's so passionate about somebody else's work, and like a child trying to discover. That's absolutely amazing. And after one of our first building, MDC, got over, he was on the site, and suddenly I get a call, Shivkumar's from Shivkumar's number, and he calls me and saying, Sanjay, I am in your building. And imagine we had done one small thing, and he's saying, I am in your building, and that's what is a greatness about him. There are a lot of things, but I think I've already passed the time. To sum up the thing, I think when people who are really close to you, or people who have really influenced you, like your father, mother, sister, great teacher, we are normally shy of telling them that how much they meant to you. You never say that to them, because we always think that they know that you love them so much or you respect them so much. But this is a one chance to say, thank you so much, sir.
First time I met Doshi in 1966. That's the time I joined his office. And thank you. And That's more than 50 years have passed. And then, but working in his office for a few years has made landmark change in my career. Change. At that time, his office was just, I think, in the old building of a 3-storied, and it was about 800 square feet, 8 to 900 square feet. There are six or eight drawing boards there, and it looked really very minimal, nondescript, and it looked very frugal also, and very simple. And it's very difficult to call that as an office. You can say it is a hybrid between a workshop and the studio, something in between, And it was very nicely described by one American architect who happened to come there. He says, I can't believe such a beautiful work of Doshi has originated in such a humble-looking office. So that was the impression. That's the time I worked with him. At that time, I think one incident, learning in the office, I'll give one incident. Doshi, once he made the freehand sketch and he brought it to me, it was a house design, the plan or something like that. So after 1 or 2 hours, it was almost getting complete. It was almost getting complete. He just walked in and looked at it. When he looks at it, it is tremendous concentration, about 30 seconds or something, It looked like piercing eyes or, just cutting through your drawing or something, that kind of feeling you get, And then I thought he was going to talk about plan or something. Suddenly he said, it's good to work hard, But as it is also equally important, you should know exactly what you're doing. I didn't understand. I didn't understand what he was saying, I didn't understand what he was meant because I just fresher, just imagine, take those days. And then he said, for that, what you have to do, you're working, you must take a pause. Look at the drawing again. You detach yourself from the drawing, right? Doing the work and everything. And again, you look at the drawing as if you are not done and find out exactly what it is. So I think this was very, very important advice, he gave me. And then he didn't stop there. To know what you are doing, why do we do all these drawings? We do all the plan sections, do the models and everything. Whole idea is to explore the spaces, isn't it? I was just imagine young, 1967, 68, this kind of thing. Then I said, yes, that's true. I didn't say yes, but I think he understood that, And then they said, how do you explore spaces? You should experience those spaces, isn't it? I said, yes, you have to experience those spaces. And then, what will you do for that? He said, you take a deep breath, close your eyes, miniaturize yourself to the scale of the drawing which you have done, the plan which you have done. And then what you should do? Walk through the plan. Walk through the drawing, look at left, right, front, all around, and just trying to understand what it is, you see. And then he said, you must go every nook and corner of the place, the drawing which you have done, and you see the staircase which is going up, climb the staircase, go up there. It was very, 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 very interesting, something, terrific lesson I've learned, And then he said, you see that mezzanine, it looks like a breach, opens on either side. Go there, look down, look on the other side, And there are some rooms, you visit all this thing. And then he said that you linger around in that place for some time, trying to find out exactly what is happening to you, And then you come out of it. Again, you ask the question to yourself, what kind of experience did I have? And he also said it doesn't matter if it's good or bad because you are doing it yourself. You don't have to tell anybody, But you must cultivate this kind of habit when you are doing the drawings. When you are doing anything about architectural drawings or something, whatever it is. I think this is a very important lesson for us, that you must cultivate the habit so that you understand the drawing much better when you walk through it. That's what he wanted to say. And there's one more one more incident I'll tell you. It was Saturday afternoon. We used to have a half day work in the office. I happened to pass by the sept, and there is a Doshi sitting under the ground with about a half a dozen students were there. So out of curiosity, I just wanted to know what is happening. I went there and stood behind Doshi just to find out what is happening. He was talking to the students, asking them what class, they had just come from the class, come out of the class. And he said, what class did you have? A student said, I think the basic sub-design or principal sub-design or something like that. And they say, what topic did you handle today? Then I said, it's about, there's quite heavy words. My English was not good, so I think they sounded very heavy those days. Say it was a rhythm and contrast and harmony and all those things. And then what else there? Sense of scale. I mean, that's a very big word, and sense of proportion, all this. But did you really understand that? He just asked students, And then students said, no, teacher was very good. He explained everything very clearly. He gave all the definitions and, we understood everything, And the Doshi maybe has got doubt or something like that. But suddenly he shifts. So suddenly he says, suppose there's grandmother in her house who has never gone to school. She's an illiterate person. But she's very fond of you. So after finishing all this school and everything, you go home. And grandmother is very curious to see you. And she calls you, son, can you come here? And can you tell me exactly what you did in the class? Now, grandmother doesn't know any language. You have to speak in the language where grandmother can understand. And then he said, if your grandmother understood exactly what you learned, then you understood too. But in case grandmother does not understand, then you also don't know what you're doing. I think it's so beautifully said. It's a wonderful thing. So I think there's one more, it's not really instance as such, but we all know Doshi, the age and the time doesn't wither him, He's aging so gracefully. It's a beautiful thing. And we always attribute some of the words, how alert, how agile, and how active Doshi is, we now say. But can you imagine at the age of 40, that's when I saw him, what kind of energy he must be having? It's unbelievable. I'll give one example. That example is, as per what I know, he was working on 4 different fronts. 4 different things he was doing at that time. His office, and SEPT was just started at the age of 35. Doshi was the age of 35 when the SEPT was initiated or started. And when I went there, it was 3 or 4 years old, the SEPT, you see. So there's 2. Third, it was inception of NID. That time it was called NDI, National Design Institute, and then the name was changed after NID. It was the inception time of the starting that. And Doshi was deeply involved in setting up that institute, you see. And then Louis Kahn had just arrived. And as we know, Doshi collaborated with that building. And so there were 4 different, one more thing, yeah. At that time, Doshi also had a time to go to foreign country on as a teaching assignment or something like that. So he's doing 5 different things, at a time. Now, listen to the result, what happened. Now, for his work, he gets very prestigious international award. It has reached to the pinnacle of the success. Except, it has changed the whole education system of India and become one of the best school in the country. And NID, as you know, this is one of the premium institute. We all know what kind of work they are producing, you see. And Kahn's building, we all know that it's an iconic building known all over the world. So I think what it shows that, it looks like, Doshi, whatever, he has some magic hand of golden touch or something like that. Anything Doshi touches, it becomes a gold. That's kind of, impression I had. Thank you very much.
So it's a great honor for me to have you here on this stage in a space that is designed by my brother's company. So it's really amazing, full circle. It's been 12 years since we started this journey. I met Doshi sir in 2007. And the first time I met him, Bijay was telling me we need to make a film on an architect called Balkrishna Doshi. I never even heard of him. So I just thought, okay, maybe interesting. But then when we met him and I was in his presence, I was just magnetized by this personality. Because he was not just an architect. He was so much more than that. He was like an elder brother, a father, everything all together talking to me. And through the last 12 years, we've been in constant touch. Even when I went through some really dark times, Doshi sir was there with me and with my brother. And he was like a father figure. He's like my second father. And I really am honored to be here on this Diwali day with you, sir. So I'd like to begin this conversation actually. First, we'd like to, since we talked about in Sarkej, first time when we were there, you were talking about how this institutional architecture is kind of dying out and stuff. And now over time, Bijoy's like worked on this project and few other projects. And we see with Bangalore International Center, the one project that's just come up in Bangalore and now it's a super success. Every day there is something happening here. It is so powerful that the city was just desperate for some space like this. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about this idea of institutional architecture and the idea of housing and how that led you to get selected for the Pritzker and that kind of journeys.
First of all, I am grateful to Vijay, all of you, for giving me this chance to be here today. When I heard my junior colleagues and student friends, I was all the time thinking that what is it, that one can talk about? And then in the end, this Narmada thing, when you surrender, question is, do you really surrender or you become one? And I think that is where the stage is I am. You never know. But the thing that comes out is that finally you are an architect. And I think the only thing I remember is when I met Louis Kahn and I invited him to do the IIM in Ahmedabad. And I worked with him till the last day that he was there, 12 years. One thing I learned, timelessness. What is timelessness? We even think of time, but we never think of timelessness. And very often we don't even think about time. We just act. We do things. And that was the time IIM was being built, and he talked about institutions. And I think when he was talking about institutions, and then he talked about Bologna, he talked about Italian places, he talked about the Greek culture, he talked about the Egyptian culture. And I wonder, do we really think that we have to create something fundamental, like the river? Simple but profound, open-ended, and yet vertical. And I think this is where the whole question came. And during this period when I was doing the IIM, first time when I presented to the board, and then finally the board agreed and they only asked me one question, but how would it look like? They wanted to know, of course. I said, I can only say I will try to find some semblance of Madurai temple. And that has still lingered in my mind, that temple. Because how much that temple haunts me, can you believe 600, 700 years, all changes, all people come and go, everything happens, but it stays. I had gone with my daughters. They were only 6-year-old, 7-year-old. And when I saw for the first time, I couldn't believe, because there was animation. It was full of life. everybody was there as if it was their second home. It was not a pilgrimage only. There was informality, there was formality, there were gatherings, they were lying somewhere, somebody's taking a bath, somebody is going and doing puja. Universe, when we talk of universe, then you realize that universe is not identified by one element. It has everything. So slowly I began to look, and then over years I have been watching that slide and then remembering that. And a few years ago again I went there, and I saw there one column and two columns, one across the other, and that was there a sculpture of Shivji and Parvati, and that was Shiva Parvati wedding. How can a column have God? And how can column have a God depicting the wedding of the celestial things? I think the message was that in nature, whenever we do something that is far beyond explanation or analysis, and after that IIMs, pergolas and everything else, I came here about 4 or 5 years ago. And when I looked at those pergolas and the creepers overeating those buildings and walls, and gradually you find that where is the building? That creeper which is so fine, so thin, it has overtaken the building complex. And suddenly I began to realize that actually what I was thinking was constant change. Constant and change both have to happen simultaneously, like our inhaling and exhaling. And I think that is the key of architecture and building. Because if we can do that, that is the building breathing, is it allowing things to happen, or we are so rigid that we have to find structure. We always talk about structure, but where is the nature of structure in nature? I think there is a natural structure, there is an inner force, there is an inner quality which is there. And then when I was thinking about, talking about things, I was wondering, what is it, that we look at? We look at the measurable, but we don't think about the unmeasurable, the emotions, feelings. Students come to the campus. They are there, sometimes some are worried, some are happy, some are new, etc., etc. But what is it that holds them? It is the latent memories of their childhood, of their association. And those memories may be connected, but in those columns and in those shadows and in that creeper and the combination, they suddenly remember those. And I think what is architecture is memories which can recur all the time, and they are very much like the natural forces which are continuously changing. And of those we must do, because what we talk about is function. Is function ever constant? Is function not an unmeasurable thing? Because what happens to the psychological feelings, social feelings? When the student is lonely, when student is gathering, when the student had difficulties, everything happens. But where does he go? Then he looks at the sunrise in the morning and he sees that bird flying, and suddenly his mood changes. And that is the power of nature. And I think that power of nature is something which, I have been trying to find all along, what Kanede talked about or what Mohe talked about. That because I learned 2-3 things by my traveling, by talking to people, meeting people, that what is it that is essential? The human being and the moods of the human being, his memories, his associations, his aspirations, and I think an alternative that he can find himself. And I think if we can get those, then architecture begins to happen. I mean, if I had not done that pergola, because when I did that pergola and planned it, it was shown on the master plan, and the chief engineer who was there, I said, but what about this budget? He says, no, as long as it is already drawn in the plan, I'll get it approved. Thank God, that happened. But the whole point is that the kind of things which we think are not useful, things, which are not really connected to cost, etc. What about the human beings? What is a home compared to a house? What are the neighbors? What are the kind of people's aspirations? When I was doing housing, I found out that people really don't want that architectural building which is rigid, but they could build something of their own, and they've thought that is my own. It may not be suitable to me. And so that is how I found empowering people, touching their heart, touching their things. And I think this is something which I am still trying to find and learn. So what I want to say in the end is, I am really grateful to Vijay and everybody and the Vijay Jain Foundation, Vimal Jain Foundation, to have gathered this, brought me here, given me this chance, and I could recollect my memories again. And what a beautiful building that is there. And so, and then other reason which is most important is the director is sitting here, and I am supposed to be meeting him tomorrow and the day after. So I think if that occasion had not come, I would not have been here. So I am grateful for that. Thank you so much.
We can have some questions. Maybe we can open it out for some questions.
Yeah, sure. Any questions? Yes. Go ahead.
So good evening, sir, and good evening, everybody. Since we're talking about Doshi sir's life and journey as an architect and Sangat and all of that, Navnath sir mentioned about the 5 things that sir was involved at one point of time. I was just curious to know about this firm called Stein Doshi Bhalla. A little bit more about Joseph Allen Stein's association and sir's association with that firm called Stein Doshi Bhalla.
Chameleon, they change colors. Depends upon where they are, what they are. If they are in danger, they are close together, whatever it is. So I knew Mr. Stein when I was in Paris, and he had come from New York, and he wanted to have a visa, and so I was sitting in the embassy, and then I met him, and then I found that he had worked with Neutra, and I told him that I had worked with Corbusier. We became friends. Years passed by, and then Stein had Mr. Bhalla. And then we met again, and there was a competition on ICRISAT, big project, in Hyderabad. And it was necessary to combine together. So Bhalla asked me whether can we join together and create this job. So we got the job. So one is the relationships happen because of purpose. They are not charity. Some meaning is there, either association or a need or learning. The third one is that I work with Corbusier, I learned from Khan 12 years, and I have been teaching in the USA, etc. So I know that I think there is so much to learn from every place. You can learn all the time, whether he's a child or he's a grown-up. So I kept open doors, and I became a partner, and we became Stein Doshi Bhalla. And then we started doing work at different scales and different levels. So this is really the story of a professional practice where opportunities are there, occasions are there, and you can discover something new. And I always find that if you can work 2 or 3 people together, you can even challenge anything, and you can do something far better than you could ever think about. And architecture is a profession where you are talking about not a building, a dead product, static product, but you're also talking about life. You're talking about use of life, life's encounters, and the kind of impression that you get. So if there are collaborations, then that is possible. And that is how actually Professor Ramaswamy decided to get all of us together, Stein, Doshi, Balla, Kanvinde, Rai, and Chaudhary. And so he told the government that instead of 2 architects, I'm getting you 6 architects. So this way we did, and then we worked together. So first thing is, there is nothing finite. 2, there are always new opportunities to learn something else that you don't know. 3, there are other dimensions which happen, and can we not explore those dimensions? I think these are the kind of things we don't do. We are doing a project in Nalanda, and we are talking there about net zero. So what it means is a complete cyclic order up to the village and up to the gobar, from the animals. We are talking about how do you really use the whole thing and create. One of the important things that in the discussion we never talked about was ecology. We never talked of sustainability. We have never talked about the kind of usefulness to the society at large. And we have not talked about how do we use climate as a resource, a place as a resource. And I think those are the things, that I find very important. And that is why I valued that partnership.
Is there any other question? No, we should. Can you take one more question, sir? Yeah.
Can I ask the question? Yeah. Rumi said, what you seek is seeking you. And Saumitro said there are 4 generations of teacher. I would add another generation. There are 5 generations. And the question is, when do you seek a teacher?
All the time. Before I go to sleep, I ask that question. What is it that I need to do now? I don't know where the teacher is, but I ask that question.
Doshi, this
Sir,
side.
Dominic Dubey.
In this beautiful journey, Doshi, of realizing that we are one, how did the mother came into the picture?
My mother?
The mother.
The mother.
Auroville
mother.
mother.
Auroville mother.
You never know when the chances happen. I was invited there and I went, and I found that there is something which I cannot specify and mention.
And
Lot
there's a
of
connection
things
with
I don't
Ompuri
understand,
temple also,
huh?
sir. Ompuri temple. That's how
Yes.
it kind of.
No,
first,
there is an architecture is when you build an architecture, if you talk about architecture or a settlement or a place, you will find that something else has emerged from what you think. If you go to Jaisalmer and see, if you go to Udaipur, if you go even to the church of Bombay or you go to any other place, you will find that certain things attract you, certain things are there which you don't know how. But if you can then analyze, there is a chemistry which works by that diversity, that uncertainty, that opportunity that comes to you to really play the game. And I think that is really what I try to do. And that is where the source is, because every time what you do is not correct, what you think is rigid. Because in nature, if you look all the time, that nature is constantly evolving. And it is growing, it is blossoming, it has diversity. We don't think about this in architectural design. We don't think about the cyclical order of nature. We don't think how climate changes are affecting. We don't know how somebody is walking and he suddenly looks at a sun rays and the shadows. Something goes on in his mind. But we don't think like that. We think mechanically. I think we have to get away that we are architects. We are talking about a living organism. I changed the word, therefore, when I had a big show in Shanghai and Delhi and Paris, that architecture is not built form, it is a living organism. It is live. And we must look at it as that way, so that there are all kinds of nuances will come. When we talk about technology, structure, order, function, how do you know that that is correct? So this whole educational system has this big problem. that we are getting into the whole classical order of systematically teaching and saying, if this cannot be there, then this is wrong. I think who has done it? Who has measured it? How do you judge? So when I started the School of Architecture, the first sentence was that education without boundaries, without doors. And I think that is the success of the story of the school. That moment you remove that, you talk about life, you talk about values of life, you talk of meanings of life, and then you go and talk about this and say how it can be used. Then collaboration comes. A planner comes, a social anthropologist comes, or a poet comes, but they talk. We don't talk about graceful things. We don't never talk about joy. We never talk about delightfulness, That is really the 7 laws of architecture. There is a delight. There is some kind of a sense of the unknown, but which touches your heart. And that is really what I think we have to think about. Change the definition. Change the attitude that we are talking about building. What function are you talking? Today the function is the same, but how did you measure it? Now why order is gradually changing to structuring social thing. We are going into paperless work, we are going into global network, we are going into other areas. How are you going to talk about all this? So we are still bound by the classical notion in our education. Building is a building. Actually, no. It is life. It is living. So I call live life fully. Give life a chance. That's my way of working. Thank you.
This is one more person, sir. We can take one last question, yeah? So,
Hello, sir. Yeah.
yes, sir.
As I read this presentation, one thing is quite prominent that as you have went by, you have always earned people everywhere. So I want to ask you, as a person, that along with materially in your practice as well as psychologically as a person, how has this helped you? Like
I
winning
tell you,
attention.
in my childhood, evening the doors were never closed. When the light is on, the main door is slightly opened. When I asked them, my grandfather, he said, because you don't know who is going to come. And my belief is, you never know who is coming in which form. And that I believe very, very strongly. That is why I can listen to people in fact of all kinds of arguments. I don't know. It's not measurable. Because your soul is talking. When you go and see Ajanta, Ellora cave, when you see those cave paintings, you look at the miniatures, you look at the 10 heads, Ravan, all these mythologies and all that. How did it happen? What are they? But they are all very, very significant in the deeper evolution of your finer senses. That is the way to see. It is not just to you transact. That's what I have brought up. I am brought up like that.
Thank you.